Hey, have you heard about the Humanity-First Doctrine? It's this new code of ethics for U.S. foreign policy that puts
Oh,
human life and dignity first.
no, I haven't. What's it all about?
Well, it's about prioritizing the well-being of people in all international actions,
Mm,
especially non-combatants and vulnerable populations.
so they're focusing on protecting civilians and ensuring
Exactly.
humanitarian aid isn't restricted?
Yes. They explicitly oppose actions that intentionally harm non-combatants or limit
Right?
essential aid.
That sounds important. How do they plan to enforce these principles?
They're aiming to establish enforceable standards to hold policymakers accountable,
Yeah,
turning ethical commitments into binding practices.
but is that practical in international relations?
Well, the idea is that by upholding these principles, we strengthen America's long-term security and prosperity
Mm,
by fostering global stability and trust.
I get that. But what about when national interests are at stake?
The doctrine emphasizes diplomacy, first advocating for
Right?
peaceful negotiations before military actions.
So military action is a last resort after all
Exactly.
diplomatic options are exhausted?
Yes, and even then, actions must prioritize civilian safety,
Yeah.
especially children.
I like the focus on accountability and transparency. How does that work?
Policymakers need to publicly document decisions
Right?
with clear explanations of intent and expected outcomes.
That could really change policymaking. What about economic tools like sanctions?
The doctrine calls for ethical economic policies, ensuring sanctions
Hmm,
don't target basic needs like food and medicine.
that's crucial. Sanctions often hurt the vulnerable the most.
Exactly. And it prohibits manipulative actions like covert operations to destabilize governments
Right?
unless they fully adhere to the doctrine.
That's a bold stance. Do you think officials will commit to this?
Well, the Humanity First Doctrine pledge is a commitment by elected officials affirming their
Yeah.
dedication to these principles.
It sounds promising, but enforcement might be challenging.
True, but transforming ethical commitments into binding practices is a step forward. Leadership
Hmm,
commitment is key.
I hope more leaders take this seriously.
Me too. It's about upholding humanity and justice in foreign policy.
Right? Well, it's definitely a doctrine worth supporting.
Absolutely. For more info, people can reach out to info@dhfd.world.